Greetings, everyone. I hope you're all having a great night tonight. Thanks for joining us on another Brony Debates Live. We've got a pretty interesting topic tonight, one that a lot of people have been suggesting since I've been taking suggestions for topics. They've all been along the lines of, what series deserves a fresh coat of paint, something like that. And I've gotten this request I think 6 times, but I've only written down the names of 3 people. They're in the description, so thanks for suggesting this topic. Which franchises deserve a reboot? And for this one, I brought on a couple of fans of some older shows or some more obscure franchises that we might not know about or haven't seen in a while. And let's just go down the line here with some introductions. Joining me tonight is one of my patrons, Princess Sunshine Sparkle. How are you doing tonight, Sunshine?
Great, Brony. Thanks for asking.
All right, and thanks for coming on. And then we've got one of my oldest friends in the Brony fandom, Mr. Scan120. How's it going, Scan?
Doing good.
Good. And then joining us yet again is the floating, scary lion head, LioConvoy. How's it going, sir?
Good evening.
All right. So, real quick, before we get started here, I just want to give a shout out to my very generous supporters on Patreon for helping make my content continued and possible, especially those guys on the $10 and up tier. One of them being Princess Sunshine Sparkle, who joined us on stream for tonight, as well as Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald, Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. This list is getting so long, I could probably make a song out of it. Every one of those guys has, well, almost every one of those guys pretty much has their own stuff that they do on YouTube or art or things like that. Their links are in the description. Be sure to check them out and thank them for their support. And with that, let's get into the topic. So if this is your first time joining us, I'm going to be watching the chat. If you have any comments or questions for anybody in particular, go ahead and leave them in the chat. Feel free to talk with each other, and we will get to them at the end of the stream. So, which franchises deserve a reboot? So, Lyle, let's start with you. What franchise or, what show would you like to see get a fresh coat of paint and why?
Well, there's several of them, honestly. A lot of them, a lot of potential. Of course, being a hardcore Thundercat fan, I'd like a decent reboot of that. The last 2 have been extremely underwhelming for completely different reasons on different ends of those spectrums. Outside of that, there are some really good shows from my childhood, specifically in the 80s, that could really do with a retake, especially in current years, due to some of the potential there. You have Mask, which was a really interesting show from the 80s, but you also have stuff like Bravestar and Silverhawks. The latter, Silverhawks, being about people who have augmented their bodies and are part of a special police force in deep space that deal with intergalactic mobsters. So that's interesting just for your imagination. And Bravestar is somewhat similar. It's about basically space Native Americans and how one of them became a sheriff in a area called
I've seen that. Silverquill did a video on that franchise once, a few years ago, and it looked like someone just had Star Wars in one hand and the Lone Ranger in the other and just clapped.
Yes and no. Lone Ranger, of course, worked outside of the law because he was a vigilante, whereas Bravestar is the sheriff. And even in the very first episode, for lack of a better word, because it's more of a movie at that time, it dealt with a lot of themes of things like racism and whatnot, and it was a really good show. It was one of the last shows Filmation did before they ultimately wound up closing their studio, so they were kind of at the peak of, my knowledge, their financial capability. They weren't using as much stock footage because they had a better budget than they did, say, in He-Man and She-Ra, which were still good shows in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of those two, I think He-Man could do with a decent reboot as well. The one from the early 2000s was really well done, specifically because it worked off the original story Bible that wound up having to get edited down, if I recall correctly, due to a lot of standards and practices in the 80s. I know we have 2 He-Man series coming out next year. One is called Masters of the Universe Revelation, that's being headed by Kevin Smith, that frankly I trust about as far as an anvil can jump. And then you got one that's going to be more kid-centric. 2 Netflix series for He-Man that I just personally don't think I'm going to have any trust or stock in, because every single reboot I've seen lately has completely failed me, and I don't trust anything anymore.
Well, nobody blames you. I'd certainly tell you that. All right, so I got some questions for you, but we'll come back to those in a minute. I want to hear from Scan now. Scan, what would you like to see get a fresh coat of paint?
So I have 2 different criterias for it. The first one is if it was just to remake a series, I'd actually really like them to remake something that I've seen that had an interesting idea but was complete crap.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they messed it up, they did no better than the originals. So the one thing I remember from way back that I wanted to see more of, but barely found anything besides the books and a few of the pieces of the toys at garage sales, but I know they had a cartoon somewhere. It was called Wheel Warriors.
Oh, Jason the Wheeled Warriors.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this.
Neither have I.
From what I heard, the cartoon wasn't that great, so it's not like they could just ruin it if they tried to make a reboot of it. But essentially, it's in space, and there's this race of vehicles that have been infected by plants that turn them into war machine things that go from planet to planet, terraforming them. And then the good guys have like space vehicles they fight them with.
Okay, so I'm hearing this, and all I can think of is somebody who was working for Bungie saw a couple episodes of this and said, you know what, I could do it better, and then made the Flood and put it in Halo. Am I wrong?
Yeah. Unfortunately, you are, because I have seen Jason the Wheeled Warriors, and that's quite a bit off as far as the quality of the cartoon. In so many years since I watched it, I can't even remember if it was actually good, but I can tell you his intro is kicking.
Yeah, like I said, I'd love to see something that was crappy tried again to see if they can make it good.
Alrighty then, and
But
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But the alternate, if I could be guaranteed that the reboot was done well, like if the same team that rebooted DuckTales did it, I'd like to see Tailspin and Rescue Rangers come back.
I've heard good things about the DuckTales reboot. So I'd be.
It's not bad. I have seen that.
I'd be with you on that. I should get around to watching it myself. Alrighty then. So Sunshine, what do you think?
Oh, well, actually, I think a show that could really use a good reboot just ended a couple of years ago, but I'm actually rewatching it now, is Young Justice.
Oh, really? They just came out with a 3rd season of that, I think.
Yeah, it just ended, like I said, 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. Wow, I'm way behind then.
I think it's 2 years ago. I'd have to check the DC Universe app. But I'm actually rewatching it from season 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I am really loving it. That would be a good one to reboot. Another show I've noticed they've actually rebooted a lot would be like Digimon, because that's had so many reboots. I would like to see it get another, because so far they have not failed on a reboot of Digimon.
How so? Tell me about Digimon, because I only know it from memes.
Well, it's kind of, people say it's a lot like Pokemon, but it's really not, because the digital world, your Digimon don't stay evolved. In my opinion, the original series, Digimon Digital Monsters and Digimon Digital Monsters 2, were the best series, simply because of the story mode to them. But if they make, so far with all the ones that I've seen rebooted, they have not failed yet in doing it.
All right. So what do you mean by not failed?
From watching, when I watch each season or each series they come out with, I'll use Teen Titans Go for example. Watching the original, everyone loved it. You know, it was a really good show, had a lot of story, had a lot of backstory, and stuff like that. And then they came out with this. Can I call it a TV show? Because I don't think I can. But in the case of Digimon, each script they've written, you can see that they put detail, backstory. Digimon Frontier, when they came out with that, it was really good. Tamers, they had story, plot, detail. Each series has story and plot to it, and that's a big factor to me. Rather than just, does it appeal?
Alrighty then. So let's see here. Let me ask you this, then, Sunshine. What was done about the last version of Digimon that you liked and didn't like?
The last version, Digimon Fusion would be the last one that I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
What I liked is it gave a lot more broad spectrum on type of Digimon and type what they could do. Giving a whole new feel to the digital world with the ability to make a team and try to battle everyone. What I did not like was the usage of the what they added, which was the fusion part.
Mm-hmm.
Because then every other series they had a fusion, and like in the original, they could fuse two Digimon together and become a new Digimon. And I don't like I felt like that was special because only two Digimon could fuse, and they kind of took that away by allowing every Digimon to fuse.
Okay, so the let me see if I followed you here correctly. Originally only two Digimon could fuse, and then and then in Fusion, any of them could fuse.
Fairly, yes, similar to that, because it only two Digimon of a set could fuse together. So in the original series, you had Agumon and Gabumon that could fuse into Omnimon. Whereas now, in this one, Shoutmon can fuse with any of his tamer's Digimon.
Okay, so what does that take away from the concept of it that you don't that you think that or felt that was a bad idea?
I felt like that was more of a special thing. Only two Digimon that were really close could fuse, whereas now, hey, I collected a new Digimon, let me fuse them. You know?
Okay, yeah, I can see how that could go awry. Alright, so let's see here. So Scan. What was done well about the last time you saw this show there that you'd want to see carried over into a reboot?
Well, it's hard to say something like that because the two I said are kind of, they have their own world, so it'd be easy just to carry on things over into it. It was a bunch of day-to-day activity those characters had. It had some overarching plots and stuff, but they were all resolved. You know, I'd like the reboot just to revisit that world.
Okay, so would you like to reboot the story from the very beginning, or and gosh, I don't know, tell it in a way that may or may not be better, or would you like to see a continuation of where the story left off?
They didn't really left off. I'd like them to be I think it would be since it's a reboot, it's a retelling of it, so a reintroduction of the characters and how they got together again.
Okay, and how well did they cover that in the first round?
They did it pretty well. They did a two-parter beginning of the series that did a good job of bringing the characters together and showing them how they did it in Tailspin at least.
Okay.
And with the reboot on, I'd actually really like to see an interesting reboot on Rescue Rangers. because the reboot of DuckTales almost made them a new origin story. And it'd be interesting to start from there.
Okay, so tell me about that origin story and why it would be so good to start from there.
Okay, well, spoilers for DuckTales, the new series. But in one of the episodes where the characters encounter two agents of Foul, the girl's got this brain ray or something that can make people smarter or stupider, and she first tested on a mouse, which becomes Gadget from Rescue Rangers.
Okay.
And through the episode, you see the mice doing little things in the background, and then at one point they need to escape, and they're like, how do we get out of this cell? And then you see the Rescue Ranger balloon that she's been building this whole time come out of the cell next to them, releases them, and then flies off with all of them like waving and saying hooray or what. Yeah.
That is pretty interesting.
So their new origin would be they were dumb mice that got hit by dumb mice and chipmunks that were hit by intelligent ray.
Okay. And Lio, for any of your suggestions, what was good about the last time your shows aired?
All right, so back in the 80s, specifically, you had people that were trying their best to craft decent stories, and there were, of course, some inhibitors there. Fairly standards and practices, a lot of parents groups, a lot of government busybodying on a moral aspect that we don't have to deal with to an extreme now. Give you an example. Ultimately wound up killing Saturday morning cartoons and what caused a major slump in Western cartoons between 1996 and closer to 2010. Saying there weren't good cartoons between then, but there was a major slump. Was due to government interference into what could or could not be put into a cartoon. Specifically, one edict that demanded that cartoons have a certain amount of educational material within them. And in the 80s, it was a bit worse in a different direction because it was a moral panic, primarily on a theological or social aspect, where specifically He-Man was considered a super violent cartoon, despite the fact that He-Man was only shown to hit somebody literally once within 130 episodes. So now, in a more modern age, you would need to do, if you want a good cartoon, especially if you're doing a good reboot, is you need people who know the source material well, who respect it, and who understand what made those special and what makes them special. Like, breaking it down for Thundercats, the fact that a lot of it was inspired primarily from things like Lord of the Rings, old school fantasy, mixed with a little bit of sci-fi. There were some Star Wars elements that were given there, but because Thundercats was far less tied to a toy line than a lot of 80s cartoons, had the ability to experiment script-wise. The people who did write for it were fond of old school fantasy, not just Tolkien, but one of them specifically was a scholar of Arthurian lore. So these things play in very well to the creative spirit when it comes to making anything that's a good story. As far as Bravestar goes, I mean, when was the last time you saw a good space western? It's been a while.
I don't even think I could name any other space western off the top of my head.
There have been a few. Apparently in the 80s, oddly enough, you had Galaxy Rangers, which was actually really good as well. And you had Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs, which was a reworked anime. These things play really well into imagination, really well into letting your mind fly into possibilities. And when it comes to writing fiction, the truth of the matter is, when you try to add any sort of cynicism to it, any fiction is stupid. When you write it well, it becomes less stupid and more enjoyable. And that's what a lot of these 80s cartoons delved into is, they were absolutely ridiculous, but they were a fun type of ridiculous. One of the writers for a lot of 80s cartoons, specifically on Hasbro's end, talking My Little Pony, Dungeons and Dragons, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Flint Dille, he just released a book on his tenure back in those time periods up until now. And they were given so much liberty in terms of absurd things they could put into scripts, so long as it still fit within the confines of the story, and it can really endear to imagination. As far as other things like say Silverhawks goes, you have space police, you have space mafia members. I mean, you could have a lot of fun with that. It just takes a skilled writer. I think part of the problem with a lot of more modern cartoons in the sense of their writing is not trying to downplay modern cartoons because there are quite a few of them I like. But I think when it comes to scripting process and their purpose, I think they try too hard to be relatable as opposed to just having fun. Can have a good balance between them. Like Amazing World of Gumball is a great balance between those two things. Other things like say Star versus the Forces of Evil goes too far in one direction.
Okay. Yeah, I actually enjoyed Star versus the Forces of Evil. So, you know, I never saw that it did take itself a little too seriously towards the end. Let me see. You know something I just realized? I never answered the questions myself. I would like to see soft reboots of either Avatar: The Last Airbender with with more of a continuation off of there. Like if we can just scrap Korra, that would make me very happy. Then and I would also like to see, if not like aside from the obvious of I do wish My Little Pony would get like the next reboot that it gets. I want that to be good. Like that's the most important thing to me. That's why I do what I do now, is because Friendship is Magic was just so good. But around the same time, G.I. Joe rebooted itself with Renegades. And Renegades, and I'm not a G.I. Joe fan, but Heather Blossom made me watch Renegades with her, and that became like up into the top 10, maybe even top 5 of my favorite shows of all time. So I'd like to see a soft reboot of that, a continuation of where they left off, or a reboot of G.I. Joe in the same vein. Has anybody else seen Renegades, or is that just me?
I have, and I have a real quick question for you. Do you know where the basic concept of Renegades and so much of how it was structured came from?
I don't know anything about Renegades other than I enjoyed it. What's up?
They basically mix G.I. Joe with A-Team.
Oh, really?
If you actually listen to the intro for Renegades, if you're familiar with it, and you go back and you watch the A-Team intro, it's obviously a play off of it. Accused of a crime they didn't commit, this ragtag group of that's the A-Team intro. It's just taken in a different direction.
Oh, geez. I see it now. So now that you're making me think about it, that's pretty great. And what was great about Friendship is Magic that I'd like to see taken over into the next one is just good characters, good voice acting, hints of story from time to time. That's that just makes me bring back writers that care. That just like what you were saying, Lio. I want writers that care about the source material and care about the characters and are actually good at writing. Same thing with Renegades, and the reason I have such a hate boner for Legend of Korra is because I didn't, aside from the villains, there was not a single sympathetic character in there, and every other episode they were turning around and breaking the lore of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which was so perfectly crafted in my eyes. It's just, why would you do that kind of thing? But I could rant about that all day. Let's get into the next question I had for you guys here. So what was bad about your shows that you picked out earlier? We'll start with Sunshine for this one. What was bad about Digimon? Something you don't want to see carry over if it were to get another reboot?
I'm gonna go with, if it got another reboot, I would say to go if they were to like remake the first one again, I would say to play. I wouldn't want to see it like start from the beginning, or what was bad about the original? I'm sorry. What was bad about the original is how much they referred back to the real world while they were in the digital world. I mean, during one episode, Ty legit returned to the real world and hung out with his sister, which, don't get me wrong, it played a big part into it, but the fact that he was only allowed to stay for like an entire day kind of bothered me.
Why did that bother you so much?
Well, because in the Digimon world, one day for their world is years for the Digimon world. So I mean, he was gone for not just each minute in the digital world and the real world is a day in the digital world. So you have to think about how much time had passed it might have only been a few hours, but you have to think about how much time would have passed.
Okay, so and that bothered you?
Yes, because I mean he left all his friends behind.
But is that an aspect that doesn't sound as much of an aspect of the original show so much as one bad episode?
Yeah. Well, I mean it referenced that part a lot throughout the series. I was just going based off of that episode.
Okay, so that would qualify as a plot hole then. And I'm looking for something that was more ingrained into the concept of the show.
I was also gonna say another thing I didn't like is during part of it, as I said before, there's an evolution process for the Digimon.
Mm-hmm.
And for the original series, the evolution process requires to go to champion. It requires you have a Digivice. To go to Ultimate, it required at the beginning of the series a little necklace that they wore that digivolved them. Okay. During one episode in particular, Tai wanted to force his Digimon Agumon to digivolve, which made it go rampage. And I like the concept of needing that courage or the hope or whatever their friendship, whatever their symbol was, to use it. And then, because I mean, it was a plot device, you know, seeing it there, you knew like they needed that. And then towards the literally at the end of the series, they're just like, oh, you don't need this anymore, and destroys it. Like,
oh, okay.
Really? And now they can digivolve without it. I mean, it's literally something they use through the entire series, and then they just do away with it and say they don't need it anymore.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you want more consistency in terms of how the universe works. Is that correct? The mechanics?
Yeah. Because I mean, granted, it was at the very end of the first series, but you just take away a big part of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to digivolve, as it's called, with that item, and then like, oh, you don't need this anymore.
All right. And Scan, what was bad about your suggestion?
It was pretty much a really basic show. They had an idea for it, but it was really just to sell the toys and stuff. I think, from what I heard, most of the episodes were just, oh, they're doing something evil, let's go stop them.
Okay, welcome to the 1980s.
Yep, exactly. So, pretty much just put a new spin on it, maybe keep some of the cosmetics and the basic idea of the world that it's in.
Okay, so like, was there a character or any aspect of the world or the concept of the show that really ground your gears while you were watching it?
Like I said, I didn't actually get to watch much of it, but I did have some of the books.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mainly just I enjoyed looking at the visuals because the story wasn't really there.
Oh, okay. So let me ask this out of curiosity. Then, were there any major differences between the book and the show?
From what I could tell, not really.
All right. Well, that could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And Lio, what was bad about the shows that you suggested? What, like whatever we do, don't bring this into the next version.
Okay, I'll get onto that in a second, but one thing I do want to make a recommendation to you for, Brony.
Okay.
I know you weren't really too fond of Real American Hero, G.I. Joe from the 80s, for probably a plethora of different reasons. Sometimes it went a little crazy. I'd honestly recommend, if you want a character-driven version of G.I. Joe, I'd really recommend you look at the original comics done by Larry Hama. Larry Hama was a military veteran. I believe either Army or Marine Corps, who was a Vietnam vet. That's where all the military stuff in G.I. Joe comes from. It's much more down-to-earth concept, much more in characterization. He actually went on record saying he believed the original cartoon was kind of morally bankrupt because nobody died. But I think that might be more your speed if you ever get the chance. I mean, yo-ho-ho it if you really care to. But as far as the cartoons, okay, Thundercats, as much as I do love it, nothing is without flaws. The original cartoon had a primary writer whose primarily name was William Overgard. And Overgard, while he could do some really solid scripts, like he did some of the best episodes, also did every single one that, with the exception of maybe one or two, that were absolute stinkers. So he even had this bad habit of set your world or your sandbox, and you have your toys in the sandbox, right? Hypothetically speaking. What William would do is he'd look at these things in the sandbox like, no, I don't want to play with those. He goes and he grabs something that they didn't make yet, and then they bring it in there. Like, he's the primary person who introduces all these other secondary characters. And while it could be sometimes a good thing, like you brought in Mandora, the Evil Chaser, you brought in Hachiman, who was a fantastic character, the closest, like, in terms of the fiction that I've consumed, in terms of cartoons, he's probably the closest thing to a historically accurate samurai fiction. But you also had Captain Bragg in his circus train, and you had Mamrana, and a little closer to the chest in terms of that. Explore some more interactive character dynamics and some background here. Like, there were some really good characterizations and background in the original Thundercats. You find out that the leader of the mutants, his name is Slythe, and his force that attacks Thundercats on their way out from their exploding planet. Find out that he's not the mutant general he's been trying to tell everybody is. He was a cook. And the entire reason for why he did it is because he was trying to do a grab for power, because he feels like he's less of who he should be because he was just a cook on a bridge somewhere. That plays into things. And I think if this was owned by somebody who knows the internal lore, knows the show, knows the characters, and actually cares about it, because I don't think the last two have been really indicative of that. Not that that's what this is about. You have to expand your horizons a little bit more, but at the same time, don't do things that break internal consistency, and don't go too far out of the ballpark. And unfortunately, Overguard tended to do that a lot. As far as Overhawks go, what I would have done with it is there are some things that didn't make much sense in terms of how they do things. One episode where basically a star was powered by a light bulb, if I'm remembering correctly. Do less of that. I'd focus on like the detective and crime work in terms of like, well, we do have these mobsters, and mobsters, they tend to operate generally in the open, but they do it in certain ways that it's hard to really deal with them. So I'd have a lot of fun with that aspect of it in terms of I would like to see done instead of just action adventure cartoon. I'd get a little more in depth into the detective work and the actual police work that would go into that, a little bit more cloak and dagger type of stuff. As far as Brave Star goes, I mean, Brave Star's only real issues came down to the motivation for the main big bag. His name was Stampede. He was this monolithic full skeleton demon thing, and you don't really find out why is he doing what he's doing. Granted, evil because it's evil can be fun. It is a really good idea if you want to have a really just fun cartoon. But when we're dealing with something that deals with things like race dynamics, in terms of making sure people are treated properly, actual death shown on screen, Brave Star dealt with a lot of really intricate things that you wouldn't expect a cartoon from the 80s to deal with in general. A lot of more in-depth things because of the time it was at. I think you could hammer down on that more and explore more of the things that happened in the Old West set in a new setting to shine a light on it and show you, hey, this was an issue then. Here's how we should deal with that now.
Okay, so how did they screw that up in the past though, for Lone Star?
For Brave Star, I think
Brave Star, yeah.
I think the main way is because they kind of truncated some of it. I don't think that they always gave it the due that it needed, or the scripting process was kind of rushed in some cases. It seemed that might just be my perception outside, not being a script writer myself. Like the issue with Prairie People, which are, you saw Silverquill's video. It was the guy who, for the high pitched voice, the guy Charlie Adler, the guy who did Cow and Chicken, did the voice of the character. The entire racial issue with the Prairie People was solved in one day under one judge with one edict, and things like that don't really go over in a single day. I think that's something they should pace out over a season, maybe leading into 2 seasons. Dealing with things like that, I think that having it done in a single episode doesn't really pay any respect to the real life issues of it.
Okay, so that's definitely good there. And let me see, for my things, what I definitely don't want to see, like if My Little Pony gets another good reboot, and I haven't seen Pony Life yet before anybody asks, but if Friendship is Magic specifically were to get another reboot and it were to be good, something that Friendship is Magic did a few times that bugged me every single time was they would not break the lore, but they would bend it dangerously close to the point of breaking and introduce new concepts that would stress it or add new aspects to the lore and never explain why. Twilight becoming an Alicorn, Flurry Heart being born an Alicorn, things like that. And there were a couple others, but those were the 2 most egregious ones in my head. That type of thing cannot go in a story. It just takes away from the whole thing. In G.I. Joe, I would when it came to a real American hero, I loved the art style of that. I thought it was, I like realistic proportions. I like anatomically correct. So I would like to see that brought back. But what really drives me nuts about American Hero is just how campy it is. I can even write off the fact that every time a plane goes down and explodes, you always see a parachute, regardless of whose side that plane was on. You always see a parachute. No one ever died. I'm perfectly fine with that, but it was just so campy, and all the characters in Real American Hero were just so goofy and so oftentimes stupid that it wouldn't even make sense in universe for them to be here. So if we can avoid having things like that, if we can avoid having bad writing and bad characters added, that would be absolutely peachy to me.
I have to ask, did you ever see the movie for the series?
There were a couple of movies, weren't there?
There were a couple of specials, but there was only one G.I. Joe movie, and that was 1986. Did you ever see it?
Yes, I did see that one. I was once a man!
A man! So, in the comics, Cobra Commander used to just be a freaking used car salesman. Now they
I remember. I knew about the comics, but I haven't read any of the comics myself yet. Just about everything that we're talking about here tonight has a comic version that's like gritty and really well done in the art department. I know Thundercats and He-Man and She-Ra all have really gritty comics. So does Transformers. I learned recently that in one of the Transformers comics, Megatron says this line. They say one gains wisdom through suffering, and tonight I intend to make you very wise. That is an insane line to me, and we need more writing like that in these actual shows. So all these 1980 shows got reboots in a manner of speaking in the comics of things that I'm looking for. But comics are expensive to get into, and I don't have the time to read. I'm way behind on pony comics as it is. I haven't read a pony comic in like 26 issues. So let's see. So with all of that being said there, I got one more question I want to ask of us. Now if there is a debate to be had, now we're getting into the actual debate part of it. Which one of us had a bad suggestion? So was it, did anybody make any suggestions or things that they think deserves a reboot here tonight that any of us disagree with? Lio, did you hear anything that you definitely do not want to see a reboot of?
No, not really. I mean, when it comes to Digimon, what little bit I did see of it in the 90s, I generally enjoy it. I know there's a lot of hindsight issues apparently with it. There's a lot of problems with the redubbing of it. Apparently some places to cultural insensitivity. But no, I wouldn't be opposed to Digimon. I wouldn't be opposed to Jason Wheeled Warriors done correctly, and I wouldn't be opposed to any of your suggestions either. I don't think anybody made bad suggestions.
Does everybody agree there?
For the most part, yeah. Except Digimon has always just been continuing on. I don't think it needs a reboot. It just keeps on getting new series that branch off.
And Sunshine, what do you think?
I don't really think that they branch off. More or less, yes, they make a bunch of references back to the originals, but you have to do that. I mean, make a reference back to a different series because, I mean, it's all coming off the Digimon adventure, you know? Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it's all the same because if you look at something like Digimon Frontier or Digimon Fusion, it makes a lot of previous references, but you can definitely tell that it's not the same. The only one that I would consider a continuation at all would be Digimon Tamers, only because of how many references they make back to it. The only one that is a perfect continuation is Digimon Adventure, Digimon Adventure 2, and Digimon Adventure Tribe.
All right, let's see here. So we got a few more minutes before we need to move to the audience participation section. So I got a couple more questions here. Somebody comes up to you and says, this show needs a reboot, and you absolutely disagree. What show is this? So, somebody, are there any shows in general out there that you would absolutely not touch, and what is the reason for it? Sunshine.
I'm sorry, could you say that again for me? My brain.
What show, if it were to get a reboot, would you say, no, don't reboot that? For whatever reason. Either it was too good to reboot, or it's just so bad that it needs to die. So someone says, we should reboot this show, and you say, no. Which show is that, and why?
That's gonna be a tough one to say. To be honest, there are a couple shows that they were just so good. Like if they were to continue, that it would be bad. But I can't really any come to mind. But would you mind if I brought one up that has gotten a reboot that I absolutely hate?
Yeah, sure.
There are three reboots that they've come out with. One being Teen Titans Go, the next being the Ben 10 reboot, and the third, oh my god, Total Drama. I can't even believe I said that name. Reason being is for not Total Drama, but we're gonna go with Teen Titans first. They took everything out of the characters. I mean everything. They made it into a cartoon for kids, and as a kid I loved that show. And they're like, it's more appealing. No. even children.
The original Teen Titans was a cartoon for kids. The original Young Justice, the first 2 seasons of that was a cartoon for kids. Just because it's a cartoon for kids doesn't mean it needs to be bad.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like they're saying is that it's directed towards children. I'm like, yes, but the original was too. Now, if they were to reboot Teen Titans again, but continue off where they ended from the original, that would have been good.
I remember hearing through the grapevine that Adult Swim was gonna do a 5th season or a 6th season.
Heard that Adult Swim is going to be picking up from where the original left off.
Yeah,
which is why we saw that, and then they made another movie based off of that. And then
they made reference to the return of them in the Teen Titans Go movie credits.
Yes, and then they made another movie where all different types of Teen Titans band together to defeat Raven's dad.
That was one of the seasons, though, in that show. But moving on here, Scan. Somebody comes up to you and says, let's reboot this show, and you say no, hard no. What show is it and why?
Pretty much any show I've ever liked, because they hardly ever do it right. I can't be guaranteed they won't just ruin it.
All right. Elio, what do you think?
There are a lot of really bad shows out there. Honestly, I'd have to say, honestly, anything that's been made already in the past, 5 or 6 years, because I think that's just superfluous. As far as no. Let me think. I'm going to be mean here, and I'm going to say Rugrats, because I could not stand Rugrats.
Neither could I, and I thought I was the last of my kind.
Oh my God.
It's not even Cluspy Shiplow's artwork that made me despise Rugrats. It's more the writing to it, because I like Duckman. It had some amusement to it, but hated Rugrats in ways I cannot describe.
Well, actually, they did reboot Rugrats already.
Are you talking about All Grown Up?
I am talking about All Grown Up, yes.
Point stands.
The show, the All Grown Up show itself, in my opinion, was good. But, yeah, I do agree with you. They really should have just stuck at where they left off.
All right, so what they need to do now is reboot Rugrats again, but now all of those original characters are our age and got kids of their own.
Right, I do have a real quick question here. Who has seen the 2011 Thundercats cartoon?
Oh my God!
I've heard about it, and I've heard it was good, and that it pretty much got the shaft from Cartoon Network, and then canceled because of poor ratings because of getting the shaft from Cartoon Network. Is that an accurate assessment?
It's inaccurate.
Okay.
Because it was killed before the ratings issue, but just asking who all here has seen it.
I have not.
I saw an episode or two.
All right, and the final person on the panel, have you seen any of the show?
Scan? Did we lose Scan?
The Discord.
Scan, we can't hear you
on
anymore.
The call.
Yeah, he's still in the call. All right, so we'll come back to that. Right. What were you saying?
What I was saying is, some people have said it's a good show. I disagree. I think that it was a bad Thundercats cartoon. Just so you're all aware, the person who was the executive producer and head writer of that show is the guy over Teen Titans Go. Just want you all to be aware of that. The man's
excuse me for a moment. I have to go hunt someone down now. No, I'm kidding.
the man's a writing raccoon. He just sifts through people's garbage. That's all it comes down to. I don't think he actually cares about anything he works on. He just sits there and gets a little giggle out of whatever nonsense he can pull out.
I did just think of one that something that could be rebooted. It's not a show or anything, but the Percy Jackson movies really need a reboot.
Well, I suppose so. I hear nothing but absolute trash about the
whoever wrote
movies.
that book. Whoever wrote that book, or not the book, but the movie, literally picked up the book, said, "I don't need this," and threw it in the trash. That's how bad the movie is.
Oh, geez. Alrighty then. So I got one more question for the panel here. Hopefully Scan comes back in the meantime.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
now we can hear you.
Yeah.
All right. So in celebration of you coming back, we'll start with you, Scan. Somebody comes up to you and hands you $1 billion and says, remake your favorite show, however you want. What do you do to it?
I remake.
We'll come back. Yeah, sit on that for a minute. We'll come back to you. Lio, you got $1 billion and creative control. What do you remake and how do you do it? What do you do differently? What would make this LioConvoy's version of this show?
First and foremost, I'd remake Thundercats from the ground up. I would, part of that money, of course, to find the original story Bible, because apparently it is floating out there somewhere in the ether, or at least, pay somebody enough to let them copy it to me. And I would use the original story Bible as a foundation, build a new one off of it, using our modern technology, using our more lax system. I would build something with better in-depth lore. I would build something that moves to different things at the end of each season. This is something I've actually given a lot of thought to. I would develop every single character more in depth, and I would expand the purpose of the series, and I would expand its audience. I wouldn't go out there to just make what I would like the show to be. I'm there to adhere to the original purpose of the show, as outlined by its creators. Because again, as much money as I would have, and the fact that it would be my version of it, it's still not mine. It's still building off of somebody else's work, and I would to respect that while making the improvements I can to the limits they had then and the time they had then. I'd want to respect that and build something better with their work as the solid foundation.
All right, and I'm going to answer the question real quick before we move on to Sunshine here. If somebody gave me that kind of money and said remake a show, I would either do something. I would like to take a stab at either Bleach or Code Lyoko. Because those were two shows that I watched a lot and thought had really good concepts with horrible execution in the long run, especially on Code Lyoko. Once I got to season 3, I dropped out halfway through. I was like, oh geez, this was tolerable before, but now it's just bad. And I'd focus a lot more on exactly what, in the case of Code Lyoko, I would focus a lot more on what Xana is and its origins. That was a supercomputer that generated a virtual world where they, that could affect the real world if through something or other. I would explain that a lot better, and I would give it a conclusive ending. And with Bleach, I love the concept of Bleach, but I would make it a lot less Dragon Ball Z, and I would the characters would be a lot less stupid. And it would not take 10 episodes to screw in a light bulb. Sunshine. You're going to remake a show in your own image. You have unlimited money. What do you do? Which show do you do and why? And what do you do to it?
What show? I can't really... Code Lyoko would probably be a big one for me as well, just because I enjoyed the show itself. And but I'd have to go again, not a show, but a book series, the Percy Jackson. I'd turn it into a show because personally, I loved the book series, and turning it into a movie, I feel you just have too much to put into one movie that you couldn't get. So I feel like turning it into like an extended long show and separating like each book into 2 halves. Or something like that.
Okay. That's pretty good.
I mean, I got $1 billion.
Yeah, well, $1 billion will leave you pretty quickly in terms of movie production.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It will. And I
With
would
now with $1 billion, you could make 10 seasons of a show as long as you don't cast an A-list celebrity. But
I was gonna say it also depends on how you do it. Are you doing cartoon or are you doing live action? You know.
yeah.
Cartoon or go home.
Oh, Lio, I just thought of this. Here's a question I want to ask you real quick. So, with what you were talking about with Thundercats there, would it be an accurate analogy to say you would give it the Voltron treatment?
Oh, I don't think that would be inaccurate. The difference with Voltron is it had to work off of two completely different shows. What I mean by that is there were references to Beast King Golion, Aura, like that. But when you look at Voltron, the original Voltron, compared to Beast King Golion, two completely different shows. And that's due to, number one, if you see Beast King Golion, if you watch it, you're going to be amazed. I know everybody gets the new goofy left, bad dubbing, bad cuts. Voltron we got here in the States is a masterwork of an editing job, because if they tried to air Beast King Golions here in the States and edited in 1984, it would have gotten ugly. In the original Beast King Golion, there was cannibalism, implied rape, there were ninjas that cut kids down. There was people willing to commit suicide for a cause. One episode had blood that rained down from the sky that set people on fire. They actually were originally trying to get Iron Savior Daltanius. They couldn't remember the name of the show because they went to a trade fair to see shows they could import. They just wrote back saying, give us the lion ones, and they accidentally got Beast King Golion, and it's just been a riot ever since then. But they paid reference to both those franchises, as different as they tend to actually be. I think in general, concept would be fine in the sense of I want to create, people remember the show being like as opposed to the reality of it. But at the same time, I don't think I'd have as difficult of a time doing so because I wouldn't have to balance two shows at the same time.
Oh, okay. And Scan, do you have an answer for me yet?
Magus XLR.
Ooh, yeah, I saw Neo Anton. I saw Neo Anton say that in the chat there. But go ahead.
Yeah, it needs to be continued.
You think so? You see, I disagree there. I thought they ended it just fine. What would you do to it? How would you continue
Take it further? Keep going.
I mean, it was an amazing show, but that would just, while we're at it, why don't we just do Dan Versus? I mean, I thought Dan Versus was a perfect show that I don't know, maybe they could have gotten more out of it, but how much are you just torturing a joke at that point? Maybe we could redo Samurai Jack. It was perfect right up until the very last episode.
There's only one thing about Samurai Jack that always pissed me off. Just one thing, though, really.
Tell me.
Only carried one sword.
I suppose. Well,
Samurai were supposed to carry two. He only had one. That always pissed me off.
Well, the deities only made one magic sword.
You could have a backup. How many episodes could have been resolved easily if he
What's he gonna do? Have a 1060 Wakizashi on his side that's gonna break the first time it hits a robot?
Yes. Then he could just shank them with it.
I don't like that idea either. All right, so let's.
What about Danny Phantom, though?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Danny Phantom. I did just think about that one really quick.
Gosh, I don't know.
I feel like they could continue a lot off of that. But anyways, let's continue on.
Yeah, let's move on to the audience participation section and see, how much we can get to. We've actually, this is probably going to be the biggest audience participation section I've ever had because I've been watching and writing down the suggestions of the chat since the very beginning here. Let's see how much we can get through. The Amazing Gumball says, The Amazing World of Gumball deserves a reboot, and I'm not sure about that one either because...
It's finished!
Yeah, and it was a couple of years ago. It was last year, I think, it wrapped up. What would you possibly do to it? What do you guys think?
Let sleeping dogs lie for at least a few years. I mean, come on, man.
Am I really going to defile this grave for money? Of course I can!
Yeah. Give it a couple of years and then reboot it. And
then ruin everybody's enjoyment of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't get called the man baby on Twitter.
Don't destroy a child's hope until after their hope is already at its peak.
Alrighty then. Let's see here. Royal Silver. The shows that I wish had a reboot series would be Ed, Edd n Eddy, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Land of the Lost, and Animorphs. So Ed, Edd n Eddy needs to not come back. I have no idea why you would reboot Courage the Cowardly Dog. I could definitely see Land of the Lost and or Animorphs getting a reboot. What do you guys think?
I'd like to see more Land of the Lost or a re-envisioning of it.
Yeah, because originally Land of the Lost was the worst thing ever. That's like one of those quintessential so bad it's good kind of examples. You know what I mean? And then the movie with Will Ferrell was actually really funny.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I loved it when they're baked and the crabs coming towards them. Mm-hmm. They're just watching, like, wow.
Courage the Cowardly Dog, I think they could probably play off of that pretty well if they did it right.
Let's see here. Martin DeRabi. She-Ra would have been much better if He-Man and Thundercats were rebooted alongside of it, and then they do a crossover between the three. Though I don't trust any cartoons executives in this day and age. And I think we made that point, but what would you think? Like, Lio, you were talking about that sort of era and brand of cartoons. What do you think? Should they have handled She-Ra in that manner?
Okay, as far as
rebooting it alongside Thundercats.
I was just beginning my statement. Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Let me go ahead and work backwards from here. Firstly, I would say no to crossover. The reason why I would say no to crossover is because they had Thundercats He-Man crossover in the comics in 2016. It was one of the worst piles of dribble I have ever read in my entire life because the people behind it didn't know either franchise. They're just trying to bilk idiots of my age. We're dumb enough to buy things like that because it has symbol of thing I like on it. And unfortunately, one of the bigger issues with my community in terms of, the He-Man, Transformers, Thundercats crowd is not exactly intelligent consumers. Just buy whatever has a logo so they get more things that have the logo. But as far as She-Ra, He-Man, you would need to do is for something like He-Man or She-Ra, you would need a competent group of writers understand the series in the sense of not going one direction or the other. While the new She-Ra, I will say, is a good show, I can't say it's a good She-Ra because it veers way too far and actually inverts a lot of things from the original one that don't really work all that well. And unfortunately, because we have a modern cartoon trend of abusive relationship or forgive the genocidal monster, you have one instance where Catra is about to destroy reality and, well, it's okay, we forgive you. Like, there are some lines here that have been crossed that you can't see poopsie, it's all okay now. As far as those things go, wouldn't recommend even having He-Man and She-Ra a reboot within the same year or in the same year of each other because would need one to lead into the other. If you're actually going by how they were previously established, since that He-Man was operating as He-Man for a couple of years, and then he found out he had a twin sister who was stolen by Hordak, and he asked to her the Sword of Protection so she can find out her true identity, and so she can claim herself as She-Ra. A big spiel about those different things. You need one to lead into the other, as opposed to them both popping up at the same time and connected. And Thundercats, I would just like to keep it completely separated from He-Man and She-Ra, because when you actually, and I actually did a video on this last year, you actually look at how these shows are constructed. I look at them and say, well, buff men with magical swords, right, bad guy, they must be the same. They're actually not. They actually have quite a few distinct differences. The majority of them are distinct differences in how they're written, how their worlds are constructed, and everything else. So I would rather just keep all of that completely separate. When you do crossovers, you want it generally within the same or within the same genre. So if you were to have a crossover between Transformers and G.I. Joe, that makes sense. Why? Because they're action adventure. They both deal with war. if you want to cross over between, I'm going to go ahead and take a swipe at this right now because I can. Transformers of My Little Pony. I'm going to look at you wondering what you're smoking, and I know they have one coming out, but just
What?
stupid. Why would you?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Scan's saying he's got to go. Scan, thank you for coming on tonight. Sorry you have to leave early.
Yep, see ya.
See you.
Later, Scan.
Alrighty then. Did you want to say anything else to that point, Lio?
Well, I do have something I would like to address in the chat. Many of the She-Ra fans complained about the reboot and yet didn't say a word about her terrible portrayal on New 52. Yes, I actually made that point in a video I did. We're talking about caring about properties. Yeah, there was a big stink when the new She-Ra came out, big stink when the new Thundercats came out. In 2003, there was a Thundercats comic line called The Return where there was implied rape. Heavily implied rape. The genocide of a group and a killing of a character. And people praised it. It's so mature. That's not maturity. That's edginess. And in the newer She-Ra, people are mad because, she looks like a boy, or all this other nonsense, instead of actually waiting for the show to come out and having words about it then. As in the New 52 She-Ra, because their argument is, it's not close enough to the source material for the new She-Ra. But New 52, she was a sadistic murderer. He literally killed He-Man. Nobody said a word. It's so dark. It's so mature. Morons. Those are the actual quote unquote man babies. People think that having vulgarity, sexuality, and violence makes a thing mature by itself. That's not how that works.
But Lio, tonight I intend to make you very wise.
That's a good implied threat. That's fantastic. But I want He-Man to be like Game of Thrones is one of the dumbest takes I've ever seen in my life.
Excuse me for a minute while I go slam my head into a brick wall for that concept.
Yeah, I don't. Nobody blames you, Sunshine. All right, let's see here. We got a couple things in a thread here that I want to give the full context to, and then get a reaction. So Royal Silver said, "I hope they would do a reboot of Captain Planet." And then Iris P95 says, "I think Schoolhouse Rock needs a reboot." And then Martin Durabius says, with how they educate nowadays, they'd focus more on pseudoscience than actual science. And those are three very hot takes. What do we think, my friends?
Captain Planet.
So we're going to reboot Captain Planet, and we're going to reboot Schoolhouse Rock. But some of us in the chat think that we would not do either of those series justice or even scientific accuracy.
As far as Captain Planet goes, there's not much you can really deal with in terms of science. It's just ultimately the argument has to come down to don't pollute, you moron. And you get a decent writer on it. I mean, you could do a good Captain Planet. The original one, it petered out very quickly, unfortunately, because we lost a bit of funding and it wasn't all that popular later on. And more importantly, they started going weird places with this. Like at one point, they wound up going back in time and met Hitler, but it didn't look enough like Hitler, clearly. It was a heavy implication. And for Schoolhouse Rocks, because Schoolhouse Rock is so timeless in its nature, I wouldn't be interested in a reboot of that. And as far as pseudoscience and that, I mean, that was mostly just basic things like grammar, spelling, punctuation, allegedly how laws work. And unfortunately, I think even kids were the original demographic for that. The modern age, I think they probably know better than believe that works the way they say it do in there anymore. So I think if they were to do a version of Schoolhouse Rocks, it'd probably be a YouTube short for 2 or 3 minutes on a specific channel as opposed to an actual program anymore.
That sounds plausible to me, but Sunshine, what do you think?
What was the other one? I got Schoolhouse Rock, but my other one has slipped my mind.
Captain Planet.
I will be 100% honest with you. I've seen Captain Planet, but I don't remember it. As for Schoolhouse Rock, yeah, sure. I don't see a problem with that one, personally. I mean, that was I love music of all genres. I'm not the type of person, you like this genre, there's something wrong with you, and Schoolhouse Rock just kind of played on that for me, you know? So if they rebooted that, I could see it going well.
Okay, so Aleximus Prime recently in the chat says there's a popular complaint that whenever Hollywood wants to reboot an old franchise, they are just going to quote-unquote cash in on nostalgia and they should make something new instead. Do you agree? And also earlier in the chat, like towards the beginning of the stream, my friend Pony Cordero says nothing deserves a reboot. Let the past die. Kill it if you have to. And I watched Lio and him get into a fight about that, which I needed to try very hard to not laugh out loud reading you two. So what do we think? Yeah, let's just make something new. Let's just screw the whole idea of reboots. Sunshine, what do you think?
I disagree. Very heartily disagree with that, because I think a reboot can add a new light, a new spin, and a new feeling to the show. It makes it it gives a new feeling to it. Yes, some shows they reboot. Whoever rebooted it or made it needs to go perish in the most horrible ways possible. But others, if done right, could very well and good.
Okay, and Lio, what do you think?
Okay, as far as we shouldn't reboot because do something new, there are plenty of newer shows, and that's fine. I'm completely okay with people having their own individual IPs. I think reboots can be a good thing, especially when you're just getting out there and starting to understand how these work. I'll have to defer to what I always defer to for moral decisions. Ecclesiastes 1:9, what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the... First thing's not deserving a reboot. Again, fight me IRL, 1v1 me, bro.
Yeah, that was... Okay, so sidebar here. Pony Cordero is a good friend of mine in real life. And him and I work out together a lot, and I've given him some tutelage on fencing, and I've been teaching him karate for about a year. I would love to see you two spar. I'll give you some kendo sticks for it, because it's about the only common ground you have. Lio, you definitely have a few years of experience on him, but he's got at least a 12 to 13 inch reach advantage on you, so that would be interesting.
That's fine. I'm up for a challenge.
I don't get on the topic of fighting because I study ancient Greek style fighting.
Nice. All right, so moving on here. Let's see. We just got a couple left. Acacia Cheetah Productions, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I would like to see a reboot of Inspector Gadget where Gadget is actually a competent but eccentric detective or secret agent with an actual plot and character development. So Acacia Cheetah Productions wants the DuckTales treatment of Inspector Gadget. What do we think?
If that's what you want for Inspector Gadget, read Batman.
I was gonna say,
because that's what you're asking for. That's one of the things we have with reboots.
Batman isn't a cyborg, though.
Some versions of him are. More importantly, the enjoyment of Inspector Gadget, other than the goofy things that would come out of him, is the fact that he's a goofball, he's a cornball, and it's Penny and the dog that solve core elements of the mystery. Not that he's an idiot. That's why people liked Inspector Gadget. They didn't go to Inspector Gadget to find actual hardcore mystery. They read Sherlock Holmes or they read comics. I mean,
or they watched Batman.
You're not asking for Inspector Gadget. You're asking for something else skinned Inspector Gadget. That's just not the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with him on that heavily. Inspector Gadget is a show you watched to not for the same reasons. You watched it because it was funny, not because he was a competent detective. Now, on one point I do agree, maybe give it a little storyline, but leave Gadget alone. He's hilarious.
All right. I never watched Inspector Gadget. At least I don't remember Inspector Gadget. One time I was humming a tune while working one day, and then somebody pointed out to me that it was the Inspector Gadget theme song, and I don't remember ever watching Inspector Gadget, so I don't know.
You might have heard the song somewhere before.
Yep. Bigorna says, hello everyone. Did anyone argue about a reboot of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoons from the 1980s because it needs one quite badly? What do we think?
That can go several ways, and I mean that in the kindest way possible. Whoever did it would have to, they'd have to know what they were doing.
How so?
They'd have to, cause Dungeons and Dragons was a very well done show in my opinion. But it's expanded on so much as a tabletop game since then. I agree that it could, if it followed current Dungeons and Dragons base lore or based on like anything that's non-homebrew, obviously.
Oh, but we have to get rid of the orcs because they're racist, though. That's what I've been hearing lately. People saying stuff like that.
Maybe not get rid of them because they're racist, but just change that aspect of them. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you actually think the orcs are racist, just out of curiosity?
I mean...
Never spoken to one. I don't know if they're racist or not.
Yeah, I mean, not outright, no.
I don't know. People that for those that don't know, for those that aren't in my Discord server, that was a hot topic a couple of weeks ago. They were talking about getting rid of the orcs because it's apparently plays into some kind of racial stereotype, and no part of what was said made any amount of sense to me. So I was playing on that as a joke there. Let's see. We got two more here. Oh wait, no, I haven't heard from Lio yet. Lio, what do you think? Dungeons and Dragons reboot.
I think if you're going to do a reboot of Dungeons and Dragons, first and foremost, you need to have Flint Dilly there to help you with the scripting process because he understands that show. He worked on it for a while. And the issue you're going to have with Dungeons and Dragons is what was a cartoon in the 80s. It's more known as the tabletop. But you're going to have a bit of brand confusion there concerning what people are expecting versus what they're going to get. So if you do it, you're probably going to have to include more of the tabletop aspect of the game in one way or another. I couldn't tell you how to do it myself. I'm just telling you, to meet that expectation, you might have to do some finagling there.
Alrighty then, and we got two more that I want to hammer through real quickly here because we're a little over time. Reflective Vagrant says, what about the show Reboot? So Reboot needs a reboot, but actually done right.
My God, yes, Reboot.
Yeah. Tell me about Reboot. I've heard about Reboot, but I don't know anything about it.
So, Reboot is, if I remember correctly, and whoever made the suggestion in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be thinking about the wrong show. Reboot was about a cyber world where a guardian was in charge of the computer, and they were constantly being attacked by bad guys during and from time to time there would be an event that it would drop down from the sky and they'd have to play a game like you would in a regular computer and complete it to save that section. And failing to complete the game or failing to get into the game would cause that section to be destroyed upon losing and everyone in it from the thing to be deleted.
Well, that sounds intense.
From all I watched, from up to the point I watched to or can remember to, there were a couple good parts. Like one, they played a game where a girl in the game and the boy from the not in the game fell in love, and she attached her own code to him so she could come back. And at the end of the series, they was done really well. They found a way to get rid of the Guardian, and I feel like the Guardian had some sort of inkling that would happen, and made that boy that I was just talking about an honorary Guardian. So when he was dispelled from the computer back to the mainframe, the boy was able to take his place. From that point, I watched a little bit of the next part, but I don't remember it.
Lio, do you know anything about Reboot?
Reboot was made by a Canadian company by the name of Mainframe Entertainment. They were the same people who did Beast Wars, Beast Machines, War Planets, I think a couple of other small productions. I personally think Reboot was done fine, as much as a fan of Transformers as I am, specifically Beast Wars. I'm actually doing a series on Beast Wars on my channel. I don't necessarily think Beast Wars, I saw this in chat too, needs a reboot, because I think it was done fine just the way it is. But I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Reboot come back in one way or another, but the biggest issue you're going to have is technology has progressed quite a bit since then. You make it timeless because people are going to want to expect it to be in 3D because the original was. But what company would do that? Mainframe doesn't function anymore. That'd be a difficult concept in and of itself. They did a reboot of Reboot, live action for some asinine reason. Netflix it miserably because it was nothing like the original.
Well, that's what happens when you let Netflix reboot something. That is the pattern I have noticed. All right, so let's see here. And the last one, Aleximus Prime says, we need a new Super Mario show.
Not.
No comment.
No comment? You don't want to do the Mario? Swing your hands from side to side. I don't remember the rest of the song.
That guy's dead now, and
I played the fifth. I have no comment.
All right, what a horrible way to end the stream, but thank you guys.
This Mario Bros. Show was good. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
All right. I'll take your word for it.
And was quoted as saying, if you overdose on drugs, you go to hell before you die.
Yeah, right.
What he said, just literally as a PSA.
All right.
May the fates have mercy on whoever reboots that show.
Just for that, someone's going to give me $1 billion and say reboot whatever show you want and do it in your way. Just because you said that, that's what I'm doing now. Screw Code Lyoko.
May the fates have mercy on you then.
I spit in their face.
Cast yourself as Mario.
You know something? I could. I really could. I got the mustache for it.
Exactly.
All right. So, thanks for coming out, especially on such short notice, Lio. It was great having you on. Did you have fun?
Of course, I have fun every time I'm here, especially considering the fact that my thumbnail image will terrify everybody who comes past it and immediately ignore the stream.
Oh yeah, I remember last time you were on and everybody was making a big deal how it looked like you were going to eat lightning bliss.
Right.
Yeah. How about you, Sunshine? Did you have fun?
Oh, definitely, especially since this was my first Brony debates, you know?
Yep.
Took me a minute because I was, like, looking at my character, I was looking at me on the thumbnail, I was like, is my entire cutie mark there? And I had to, like, really look for it.
Oh, well, focus up. The topic is more important. We can fix that later. Anyway, thanks to everybody who came out and watched and participated in the chat. We had a really good conversation tonight. Nice and relaxed as opposed to, the last Brony debates we had, which, good conversation too. Different types of things. You need the variety is the spice of life. Anyway, thanks to all of my supporters on Patreon for making this stuff possible, especially those guys on the $10 and up tier, one of them being our friend here, Princess Sunshine Sparkle, as well as Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, and the Equestrian State of Heroverse series. If I read people's names that fast, does it even really matter anymore? If you would like to get on this show, I would love to have you. We just need you to get on the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And from there you get into the Discord server where we hang out and where you can come on any of the shows and make suggestions for game. If you want to see more live streaming from me, tomorrow night I'm going to be on Princess Heather Blossom's channel at 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time reading the chat for Chaos and Crocheting. And then next Thursday at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we've got another Friday Night Fights. So I hope to see you all there. I'm sorry Scan couldn't stay with us for the rest of the conversation. I'm sure he would have had some really interesting inputs, but thanks to him for coming out on such short notice as well. And with that, I hope you all have a great night. Goodbye, everyone. Say goodbye. Alrighty then, I'll roll
Later.
it.
Have a great day, everyone.